Stephen King has sold over 350 million copies of more than 60 novels. But how do you pick the best of the best? Today I am trying to rank my top 10 best Stephen King novels. From the bone-chilling horrors to the emotional epics that he wrote. And my number one might just surprise you. Whether you're a diehard Stephen King fan or just getting started, stay tuned, because you might find a new favorite. Now, all the books I talk about are, as always, down in the description, so you can do your own research. Let's start ranking. And at number 10, we start with the Dark Tower series. And yes, I know it is an entire series, call it cheating, I don't care. Because here's the thing with the Dark Tower series. It has some of his best writing and some of the rest. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved this series as a whole. I loved the whole span it had. I even loved the ending, but the road towards it can just get a bit rocky, especially in the last few novels. If I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be Wizard and Glass, which is, I think, the fourth novel in the series, and this is perhaps the strangest book in the series as well. It is actually one huge flashback to Roland's main character's youth and his previous relationships, and it doesn't really follow the main storyline at all. It is a story in a story, and normally it shouldn't work. But it does, and it shows why King is still the king. The Dark Tower series is for you if you're a fan of Western elements in both fantasy and sci-fi. I should stay away from it though if you are not really invested in reading an entire series. Some of the books are a bit boring, some of the books do not really add to the story, but you have to see the series as a whole. So this is why I'm going to place the entire series at number 10. It has some highs, it has some lows, but it is still worth the read. The Dark Tower series at number 10. Moving on to number 9, we have The Green Mile. And if someone comes to me and they say, oh, I don't know about Stephen King, I'm not a fan with the horror and everything, this is the book I recommend them. Now, many will know this one from the movie adaptation with Tom Hanks, of course, but if you like the movie, I will still say read the book as well. I know it sounds impossible, but the book delivers even more on the emotional ending. It is such an innocent story, it is an emotional story, it is a sad story, and for me personally, it was an eye-opener. An eye-opener to the fact that King could do so much more than the horror work I knew him from. The Green Mile is for someone who's not really into horror, but still is looking for a gripping story. Stay away from it though if you don't want to be left devastated after reading it, and if you don't want books to make you cry. The Green Mile at number 9. At number 8, we finally slowly venture into the gruesome stuff, although it is still a bit on the surface. My number 8 is Needful Things. Now, Needful Things is perhaps a book you won't find on many Stephen King top 10 lists, but for me personally, I really enjoyed it. As so many Stephen King novels, it is the quintessential battle between good and evil, but it is portrayed ever so well with interesting characters and a great setting, and yeah, it is an excellent book. I absolutely loved Leland Gaunt and how he's portrayed. He's almost like a comic book villain or a cartoon villain, and it works like a charm for this one. I love how this book slowly but surely transforms from what seems to be a quiet, almost perfect little town into absolute mayhem. The chaos, the violence, it is delectable. This one is a book I would recommend if you love to see it all go to ruin. This one is for you if you think the true horror is to be found in the people around you. And this one is definitely for you if you really love a good villain and perhaps secretly root for him. Now, if you don't like your books to be moralistic about, let's say, our capitalist society and the greed that it brings with it, then stay away from this one. Needful Things at number 8. Salem's Lot comes in at number 7, and yeah, what else is there to say but vampires? Now, ever since I read the classical vampire stories, Bram Stoker's Dracula, for example, I never really got back to liking contemporary vampire stories. In fact, if you come up to me and you're going to ask me if I'm Team Jacob or Team Edward, then we're going to have some trouble. This book, however, might very well be the exception to the rule. Salem's Lot was Stephen King's second book ever, but you won't be able to tell. It is so well written. It truly is the essential Hollywood horror story in many ways. It has a haunted house on a hill, there are the really creepy vampires, and it shows where he got his influences from. He really studied his vampire classics. Now, in fact, if you are new to Stephen King and you want to know all about his horror writing, then I would say this is an excellent place to start. Yes, it delivers on all the classical tropes, but it still adds a new, fresh perspective to the modern contemporary vampire story. Also, good to know, if you are planning to read the Dark Tower series, read Salem's Lot first. Not only because there are going to be some recurring characters in the Dark Towers, but also because the Dark Tower series does contain some spoilers on whatever Salem's Lot is about. So do be aware of that. And yes, Salem's Lot is for you if you like classic horror. Salem's Lot is all for you if you're into dark, creepy, menacing vampires, but I should stay away from it if you want your vampires to be sparkly. Salem's Lot at number 7. At number 6, just shy of our top 5, and I can already hear people screaming at me because it is too low, it is Pet Sematary. It is a well-loved, well-known, iconic Stephen King horror story, but it is so much more. At its core, it is a book about loss, about grief, about mourning. And this is indeed where the book shines for me. It is equal parts terrifying and heartbreaking. And yes, I will say the book starts a bit slow as we get to know our main characters, our protagonists, how they settle into their new lives, get to know their neighbors, but trust me, it all pays off in the end. And I do think this was one of the first books that actually managed to freak me out. I never thought that mere inked on paper could give me goosebumps, but this book surely did. If you love a great horror story that offers more than just gore, then this is a book for you. And if you're looking to have your cage rattled by a book, then again, pick this one up. However, if you're not ready to visit some really dark and brutal pages, and do check the trigger warnings for this one, then shy away from it. No one's judging you, and it is totally acceptable for a grown-up to sleep with the lights on. Pet Sematary at number 6. Alright, we are halfway through this top 10, and let me know down below in the comments which is your favorite Stephen King novel so far. Drop it in the comments below and let me know if you agree with my picks. And now, onwards to our top 5. Entering our top 5, we have a huge book. It's almost 1200 pages and it is titanic in every way of the word. This is The Stand. This book is post-apocalyptical, it is speculative fiction, and I personally made the mistake of thinking it was a good idea to read this book, which is all about a very dangerous virus during the COVID pandemic. And for me, it became all too real at one point. It was almost as if the book was competing with the evening news, and at one point I simply had to drop it and stop reading. I did, however, pick it up again much later after the pandemic was gone, and I must say it is so well written. For me, it is one of the best examples that King can write characters that you actually come to care for. He does characters so well, and it really shows in this book. And don't be intimidated by its size. This book can be a roller coaster and will get you hooked right from the start. Read 1, 2, maybe 3 chapters and I'll guarantee you're invested in the story and you'll just want to finish it. And yes, there are some dips in the pace, which is to be expected from a book that is that big, but I guarantee you it will get good again. And don't be fooled, this isn't just a book that is all about a virus that is about to wipe us all out. This one gets really supernatural as well. It is all about good versus evil, light versus dark, almost in a Star Wars and Bible kind of way. In fact, this is the book of dark Christianity. It really goes all Old Testament on its reader. This one is for you if you love or hate Randall Flagg as a villain. I would recommend this one to you if you're looking for a horror story that doesn't pull its punches. A story that really dares to go into some dark and brutal places. Again, a book I do recommend checking your trigger warnings for. Now, this is not for you if the whole supervirus trope still hits too close to home, and I would not recommend it if you don't want your fiction to go overly religious for you. Kicking up our top 5, The Stand. And at number 4, here's Johnny, it's The Shining. Now, with this absolute classic, first things first. The movie adaptation and the book are two separate things. Now, I'm not going to go into a debate about which is better, I'm just saying that these are two very different things, with different endings. That being said though, it is no secret that Stephen King himself does not really like the Kubrick version. But back to the book now. Again, we get this haunted house on a hill trope, but King transforms it into something really far more scarier. The Overlook Hotel is written so iconically, so atmospherically creepy that it almost becomes a character in its own right. And again we get that really unique Stephen King twist to a horror story. Woven all through the horror narrative, there is a whole different story here. A story about alcoholism, domestic abuse, uprooted families and how it affects children. And this is also why I think the book packs more humanity than the film does. It shows the characters with all of their flaws, but also in a way that you can somehow understand them. And this is where, pun intended, this book shines for me. Yes, you can absolutely read it as a ghost story, as a tale of the supernatural, but you can also approach it as a warning against alcoholism. A very twisted coming-of-age story. In a way, it is almost that you're getting two books woven masterfully together for the price of one. And both are equally terrifying in their own way. Now, if you love The Shining, do know that there is also a sequel, Dr. Sleep. And in this book, we revisited Dan Torrance, which is the young boy from The Shining book, when he is middle-aged. The Shining is for you if you love haunted houses, but they don't necessarily have to be gothic castles. And do read The Shining if you want to witness how substance abuse can wreck lives. Stay away from it though if you don't want your next hotel stay to be ruined, if you hate creepy kids, and if you don't want to read about insanity. Number 4, an absolute classic, The Shining. Now we enter our top 3, and this is where it really got difficult because all of these books are so good I just kept switching them around. So yes, I've ultimately landed a top 3, but don't pin me on it because it might just change in the future. And at number 3, I would place Misery. Now this book is the ultimate proof that you don't need something supernatural to write a book that is still scary as fudge. This book is simply gruesome. It is an absolute page turner. It does balance on that tightrope between horror and thriller, and Annie Wilkes is one of the best villains ever. We don't often see female psychopaths, but she's definitely one for the Hall of Fame. And Misery is in fact a very claustrophobic book. You as a reader are held captive together with the main characters in a very small place that is brutal and gory and absolutely filled with gruesome scenes. And on top of that, if you know that Stephen King himself sees the whole of this book as one big metaphor for his raging cocaine addiction and how he was held captive and abused by the drug, then this book hits on another level. Now, I'm not going to say much more about it because I think this is a book you have to go into without knowing too much about it. But again, before you do check your trigger warnings because this one is truly gruesome. I recommend this one if you really love a very psychological and dark thriller. This one is for you if you love reading about psychopaths and serial killers, but you also want a bit of a different take on them. I would not recommend this one, however, if you're not really comfortable reading about pain and torture and mutilation, because there is a lot of it in this book. At number 3, it is all about misery. And then at number 2, just shy of that number 1 place, it is everyone's favorite clown. Yes, this is it. It is Pennywise, it is the Losers Club, and it is truly one of the best book with children as main characters. This book, in fact, is one of the best coming-of-age stories that are out there. I knew these children. I was one of these children. I mean, it is so well written. Stephen King does a great job of understanding childhood, adolescence, and weaves all of these everyday things like chores and homeworks seamlessly together with a supernatural thread. And even then he goes above and beyond and adds another layer. A criticism of society, of things like racism and homophobia, and it packs a lot. And it all comes together in such a brilliant way. I absolutely love this book. Now, don't be mistaken, every reader I know that has finished this book testifies that they have survived it. It is a big book, it is a heavy book, and it does cause so many conflicted feelings that once you finally finish it and close the book, you just relax your posture and let out a sigh of relief that you didn't know you were holding. But it is so worth it. If there is such a thing as a true American novel, then this is the true American horror novel. This book is for the people who love the film but want more. This one is for horror lovers who want unforgettable characters. And this one is for everyone who thinks sleep is overrated anyway. Now, I would stay away from it if you are scared of clowns, teenagers acting their age, and really big books. At number 2, Pennywise the Clown. This is it. Now, before I reveal my personal, absolute Stephen King favorite of all times, I do want to highlight a bit of an odd one out. On Writing. Now, On Writing didn't really feel at home in this list because it is the only non-fiction work, but I do think it is worth the read. It is part biography, part Stephen King letting us look into his head and revealing all of the rules he follows and all of the secrets he uses to writing compelling stories. And he does so in his own unique way, and it is often very funny, it is really interesting, and even if you're not a writer or an aspiring writer, I do think that you should give this book a try. I personally did the audio version of this book, which is narrated by Stephen King himself, and yeah, it gives you that background information and tells you all of the interesting tidbits and stories behind the books, behind the stories. On Writing by Stephen King. If you're a fan, absolutely pick it up. And then, let's get back to our number 1. And I already know that many people will disagree with me here, and that's fine. But the most compelling story, the book I enjoyed reading most, is not a horror story. It is not a story about murderous psychopaths. No, it is a story about time travel. It is, of course, 11/22/63, and in my opinion, this is a story that offers something to every reader. It has time travel, it does historical fiction, it has all the action you crave, and it even has a very good love story. It ticks all of the boxes. And while many people think that this wandering from one genre to another is the big criticism for this book, I beg to differ. I think it is one of its strengths. For me, it is an excellent example that Stephen King is much more than a one-trick horror pony. That he can write compelling stories that will have you on the edge of your seat in any genre. Hell, this is even where I decided that if Stephen King ever starts writing spicy romance stories, I'll be a convert. The characters in this book are Again, some of his best. Now without spoilers, because the whole cover of the book screams it is all about the JFK assassination, but let us have a look at Lee Harvey Oswald. In this book, he's not some raving lunatic, he's not a brainwashed fanatic, he's in fact rather sad. A very broken character, and you almost feel sorry for him. Yes, this might not be a horror story, but for me this is King at his best. And since this is one of his most recent novels, for me it is a sign that he's not past his peak just yet. And I have to say, I like King as a non-horror writer. But that's my opinion, and now I want to hear yours. Dive into those comments and share your favorite Stephen King novels with me. Do you agree with my number one, or which one would you put at the top? And while you're there, do leave a like and do subscribe, because it makes all of the difference for this channel. Thank you for watching, and should you want more bookish content like this, well, I think you might find this little video over here quite interesting.